Sometimes the loudest truth doesn't arrive with a whisper, it crashes in like bricks. Chosen ones, let me tell you something unsettling. Psychologists have found that people often don't recognize value until it's gone. It's called the hindsight bias. That's the fancy way of saying they only realize you were the one the whole damn time after they already fumbled the bag. And now, it's hitting them, hard. The kind of hard where someone smiles at you in public but cries into their pillow at 2 a.m. because they just remembered who you became without them. See, the plot twist they never saw coming wasn't your downfall, it was your rise. While they were busy writing you off, you were secretly writing your legacy. And now, the bill has come due, and they're paying in regret. Oh, and the funny part, they thought they were the main character. Turns out they were just unpaid extras in your movie. Number one, they realized too late that they measured you with broken rulers. They realized too late that they measured you with broken rulers. That's the truth most people can't handle. When they looked at you, they didn't see you. They saw their own limits, their own fears, their own shallow version of what worth was supposed to look like. They thought success was about appearances, quick wins, or who could talk the loudest in the room. They never expected the quiet one they dismissed to become the person standing in a place they could never reach. And now the measuring stick they used to size you up looks ridiculous against the reality of who you are today. People judge by the surface because it's easy. They look at where you were, not where you were headed. They look at what you had in your hand, not what you had in your mind. They think they're smart when they write you off, because in their world, potential doesn't count unless it's visible. But here's the twist. What they didn't understand is that the real chosen ones aren't built in the spotlight. They're built in the shadows, in the grind, in the places nobody claps for you. That's where the true scale of value is measured, and they couldn't see it because their rulers were too small to measure growth they didn't understand. Now it's hitting them like bricks. They remember every time they doubted you, every joke they cracked, every dismissal, and it burns. Because the math doesn't add up anymore. According to the standard they lived by, you weren't supposed to become this. You weren't supposed to outgrow their reach, outlast their mockery, or outshine their expectations. Yet here you are, undeniable, standing as living proof that their entire system of measurement was broken from the start. The cruel part for them is that they can't rewrite it. They can't go back and measure you differently. Their judgment is already recorded in the way they treated you. And the guilt of knowing they misread greatness when it was right in front of them is heavier than anything you could ever say or do. That's the sting of realization, the fact that you didn't change overnight. You were always this, but they didn't have the tools to see it. And now that truth is permanent. They measured wrong, and the results are written in your life. Number two, the proof of who you are was never loud. It was consistent. The proof of who you are was never loud. It was consistent. That's what most people missed. They were waiting for some dramatic announcement, some big show of power, something they could point at and say, there it is. But real strength doesn't need a parade. Real strength is shown in the way you kept showing up day after day, when no one was watching, when no one cared, when nobody thought it mattered. Consistency is the quietest weapon, and it's also the deadliest. They overlooked you because they confused noise with progress. They thought the ones shouting the loudest, flashing the most, or moving the fastest were the ones winning. But noise doesn't build anything. Noise fades. What lasts is what can be repeated, what can endure pressure, what doesn't crumble when life stops clapping. You had that even when it didn't look impressive. You built with patience, with discipline, with endurance, and while they thought you were stuck, you were actually stacking bricks they couldn't see. Now the weight of your consistency is undeniable. The life you live today wasn't created by sudden luck. It was carved by years of quiet persistence. The jobs you worked, the sacrifices you made, the times you didn't quit when quitting would have been easier, all of that became the evidence. You didn't need to shout because the results now speak on your behalf. People are finally seeing what was there all along, but only because the consistency has grown into something too big to ignore. And here's the irony. The same ones who dismissed you now admire what you've built, but they can't retrace your steps. Consistency can't be faked, it can't be bought, it can't be copied overnight. It's the difference between a spark and a flame. They had sparks, flashes of effort, bursts of attention, short-lived excitement. You had a flame, steady and unshaken. And while sparks burned out, your fire never stopped burning. That's why the realization hits them so hard. It wasn't that you suddenly became great, it's that you were great all along, but in a way too subtle for them to recognize. They thought consistency was boring. They didn't see that it was the blueprint of transformation. And now every result in your life is a reminder that you didn't need loudness to prove yourself. You only needed time. Number 3. They mistook your struggles for weakness, not training. They mistook your struggles for weakness, not training. That's the mistake that blinds people. They saw you go through hardships, losses, and disappointments, and they thought it was proof that you weren't built for greatness. They assumed that because you stumbled, you couldn't rise. Because you were tested, you were fragile. They didn't realize every struggle was secretly shaping you, building parts of you that ease and comfort could never create. What looked like defeat was actually conditioning. What looked like breaking was really preparation. Struggle doesn't just test character, it forges it. Every setback sharpened your focus. Every rejection toughened your skin. Every failure taught you what nothing else could. But people on the outside couldn't see that. They only saw the surface. They saw the exhaustion, the mistakes, the moments you were on the ground. They thought that was the end of the story. They didn't understand that chosen ones aren't trained in safety. They're trained in fire. And every blow you took was fuel for the strength you carry now. The irony is sharp. The same people who dismissed you because of your struggles now have to face the reality that those struggles made you unshakable. You didn't get weaker in the storm. You learned how to walk in it. You didn't get lost in the pain. You learned how to turn it into power. They were laughing at what was actually your transformation process. The pain was your coach, the setbacks were your lessons, and the delays were your building blocks. Now they see the results, and it confuses them. How could someone who went through all of that stand taller than those who had it easy? The answer is simple. Comfort teaches nothing. Struggle teaches everything. You developed resilience that they don't have. You built endurance they can't fake. You earned wisdom they can't buy. What they mocked was the very thing that gave you an edge over them. That's why it hits them so hard now. They thought the struggle was proof of weakness. But what they're facing is the truth. Every battle you survived became part of your armor. Every scar turned into strength. Every failure became knowledge. And now, the very struggles they pitied are the foundation of the power they can't compete with. Number 4, you were the test, not the student. They thought you were the one being tested, the one fumbling through lessons, the one trying to prove yourself. But in reality, you weren't the student at all. You were the test. Life used you as the measuring stick to expose who they really were, the way they spoke to you, the way they handled you, the way they dismissed or disrespected you. Those weren't just casual actions. They were answers on an exam they didn't even realize they were sitting for. And every time, they revealed the truth about themselves. People assume the test of life comes as big moments, clear trials, obvious challenges. They imagine themselves walking into situations where they know they have to prove something. But the real exam is subtle. It shows up in how you treat people when you don't think anyone is watching, when you think it doesn't matter. You were that test for them. Their patience, their loyalty, their humility, their kindness, all of it was weighed in how they dealt with you. And now, looking back, the grade is obvious. They failed. That's the cruel beauty of it. They thought they were above you, thought they were the ones evaluating you, grading you, deciding if you were worthy of respect or love or opportunity. They were so focused on trying to measure you that they didn't realize every decision was a reflection of them. The arrogance, the envy, the betrayal, none of that stained you. It stained them. It's their record that's been written, not yours. Now the realization is heavy, because once the test is over, there are no retakes. Life doesn't hand them another version of you to try again with. There is no second chance to show they understood the assignment. They can apologize, they can regret, they can replay the moments in their head 1,000 times, but the answers are already locked in. Their treatment of you became their final score. That's why it stings so deeply. They thought they had power over you, when in truth their every move was exposing who they really were. You weren't the one under examination. You were the exam. And the worst part for them, they didn't just fail you. They failed themselves. Number 5, Their entire identity needed you to be small. Their entire identity needed you to be small. That's the hidden truth most people don't want to admit. They built their sense of importance around the idea that you weren't a threat, that you would always remain beneath them, that they would always have the upper hand. Your smallness was the foundation of their confidence. It wasn't real strength they had. It was borrowed pride, fueled by the illusion that you would never grow. They felt tall only because they believed you would stay low. That's why your expansion is devastating to them. The moment you outgrew the box they placed you in, the entire structure of their identity started to collapse. You rising isn't just about your success. It's about exposing that their confidence was fake from the beginning. Because if your growth can erase their self-image, then it means they never had true power to begin with. They had scaffolding, not substance. And scaffolding falls apart the moment the structure it leans on disappears. It hits them hard because they realize their greatness wasn't built on their own achievements, but on your supposed lack of them. They defined themselves by comparison. As long as you were overlooked, they could pretend they were ahead. As long as you were underestimated, they could convince themselves they mattered more. But when you broke free, when you expanded into who you really are, their measuring stick snapped in half. Suddenly, their entire narrative had no weight. And here's where it cuts even deeper. You didn't even grow to compete with them. You didn't expand to prove anything to them. You expanded because that's who you were meant to be. Your rise was natural, inevitable, undeniable, but for them, it feels like destruction. Your very existence at this new level is proof that their self-image was a fragile lie. They're not humbled by your growth, they're erased by it. Now they're left with a hollow truth. Without you being small, they don't feel big anymore. Without your silence, they don't feel loud. Without your shadow, they don't look bright. And the tragedy for them is that they can't shrink you back down. The damage is permanent. You've expanded, and in doing so, you've erased the illusion that held their identity together. Number 6, you weren't competing, you were creating. You weren't competing, you were creating. That's the difference they never understood. They spent their energy trying to outshine you, trying to measure themselves against you, trying to prove they were ahead. But you were never playing their game. You weren't chasing after the same trophies, the same validation, the same shallow recognition. While they were focused on winning applause, you were focused on building something lasting. And now, they're faced with the painful truth that their victories don't even count in the space you've created. Competition is rooted in comparison. It needs an opponent, someone to measure against, someone to beat. That's why they obsessed over you, because they thought you were their rival. But creation doesn't need comparison. Creation doesn't ask who's better. It asks what's possible. You were busy shaping new ideas, building new paths, and redefining what success even looks like. While they were obsessed with looking like winners, you were quietly changing the entire game board. That's why your growth unsettles them so much. It's not just that you surpassed them, it's that you made their trophies meaningless. What's the value of being the best in a contest that no longer matters? What's the point of bragging about medals in a race no one else is running anymore? They're left clinging to recognition that feels empty because the world you've built doesn't validate their efforts. Their crowns don't fit in your kingdom, and here's the deeper cut. They don't know how to exist without competition. Their whole identity depends on winning, proving, outperforming. But you don't need to win against anyone because you've stepped into creation, where the only comparison is who you were yesterday. That freedom is what terrifies them most. Because while they're still chained to the need to outdo you, you've already moved on to building something so expansive they can't even enter. Now they're realizing you were never a rival. You were a pioneer. And pioneers can't be beaten because they're not running the same race. You didn't just outshine them, you made their shine irrelevant. And that's the truth they'll never escape. While they were busy competing, you were creating a reality where their victories have no value. Number 7, they see that their absence was your advantage. They see now that their absence was your advantage. What they thought would break you, what they assumed would crush your spirit, was actually the very space you needed to become untouchable. When they withdrew, when they rejected you, when they abandoned you, they believed they were punishing you. They thought you would shrink without their approval, collapse without their support. or remained stuck because they withheld themselves. But their absence became the soil where your independence took root. The silence they left behind became the environment where your strength was born. Neglect has a strange way of forcing growth. It teaches you to rely on yourself in ways comfort never could. It strips away illusions about who is truly there for you and who isn't. And while they thought you'd be desperate for their presence, you were learning how to thrive without them. That's the part that cuts them now. The realization that their disappearance didn't weaken you. It freed you. It severed the very strings they were hoping you'd always depend on. What they saw as abandonment, you turned into alignment. Without their noise in your ear, you discovered your own voice. Without their control, you found your own path. Without their influence, you began making choices for yourself, not for their approval. And now, standing in the version of yourself that grew from that silence, you're someone they can't touch, can't manipulate, can't shrink back down. Their absence became the protection you didn't know you needed. The bitter truth for them is that they expected to haunt you, but instead they erased themselves from your story. They thought you'd look back wishing they were there. Instead you look back realizing you only became this strong because they weren't. That's the twist that's hard for them to swallow. They didn't damage you by leaving. They disarmed themselves. They gave up their only chance to shape who you became. Now they watch a version of you that exists beyond their reach. And every time they see you, they're forced to face it. Their absence wasn't the curse they hoped for. It was the gift that made you unstoppable. And that truth will follow them longer than their presence ever could. Number 8, they're realizing you didn't just survive without them. You evolved beyond them. They're realizing you didn't just survive without them. You evolved beyond them. That's the part that hurts the most. If you had only managed to scrape by to get through life without collapsing after they left, that would have been enough to shame them. Survival alone would have proven they weren't as important as they believed. But you didn't stop at survival. You transformed. You became someone greater, someone stronger, someone more refined than you ever were when they were around. And now, that evolution is the mirror they can't stand to look into. The truth is, survival would have been the bare minimum. It would have shown resilience, sure, but it wouldn't have scared them. What terrifies them now is that you didn't just make it through. You used the pain, the betrayal, the rejection as raw material for growth. You didn't just rebuild yourself to where you were, you broke through into a higher version of yourself that they can't even reach, let alone touch. That's the wound that keeps reopening for them. The fact that their absence was supposed to shrink you, but it expanded you into someone who exists completely out of their league. When they look at you now, they see not just survival, but transcendence. They see discipline where they expected weakness. They see wisdom where they thought you'd only have bitterness. They see strength where they assumed there'd be scars. And the worst part? They know deep down that none of it would have happened if you had stayed dependent on them. You had to be left behind, discarded, underestimated. That's what unlocked the evolution. Their mistake became your metamorphosis. Now you stand as proof that their presence was never the key. Their validation wasn't the fuel. Their support wasn't the foundation. You didn't just replace what you lost, you built something entirely new. And in doing so, you left them behind in a permanent way. They can't catch up because they were never designed to walk the path you've taken. That's why it stings so deeply. It's not just that you're fine without them, it's that you're thriving at a level they can't even dream of touching. You didn't just outlast them. You outgrew the entire version of yourself that ever needed them, and now they're forced to live with the fact that their absence was the beginning of your evolution, not the end of your story. Number 9, they mocked the seed, now they fear the tree. They mocked the seed, now they fear the tree. Back then, all they saw was your beginning, fragile, hidden, uncertain. You didn't have the fruit yet. You didn't have the branches. You didn't have the visible proof of what you were becoming. And because they couldn't see the future inside you, they laughed. They thought roots meant weakness, that smallness meant insignificance, that patience meant failure. They mocked what they didn't understand, and in doing so, they revealed how shallow their vision really was. But roots are where the real work happens. Roots don't make noise. Roots don't shine. Roots don't impress anyone. Yet roots are everything. While they were busy ridiculing your early stages, your roots were anchoring you, feeding you, preparing you for a height they couldn't even imagine. They saw nothing happening, but underground everything was happening, and now that hidden work has revealed itself in ways they can't deny. The tree they mocked into being is the tree that overshadows them now. What they once dismissed as nothing has grown into something that commands space. Your presence stretches wider, your influence spreads further, and the shade of your growth covers areas they can no longer reach. What once seemed laughable has now become untouchable. The same mouths that laughed at your beginning can't laugh anymore because your existence is proof of how wrong they were. And here's the sting for them. They can't undo their role in the story. They can't go back and take back the ridicule, the doubt, the insults. Those words are part of the soil now, and the irony is that even their doubt became fertilizer. The more they mocked, the deeper your roots went. The more they dismissed you, the harder you anchored yourself. Without realizing it, they helped create the very tree they now fear. Today, when they look up at you, it isn't just your growth they fear. It's the reminder of their blindness. They had a front row seat to greatness in its earliest form, and instead of nurturing it, they laughed. Now the shade of your tree makes it impossible for them to stand in the same light, and that's what truly eats at them. What they mocked has grown beyond their control, and there is nothing they can do to cut it down. Number 10. They thought power was about control, not creation. They thought power was about control, not creation. That's where they got it twisted. To them, power meant keeping people in line, pulling strings, making others feel small so they could feel big. They lived off manipulation, intimidation, and dominance. And for a while that worked, at least on the surface. They could silence people, they could restrict opportunities, they could demand loyalty. But control is fragile. It only lasts as long as fear lasts. The moment fear fades, their grip is gone. While they were busy trying to dominate people, you were quietly learning something deeper. You were learning how to create, how to build, how to generate, how to leave something behind that stands on its own. And creation is a different kind of power. It doesn't require chains or threats. It doesn't need to hold people hostage. Creation generates influence that continues even when you're not in the room. It plants seeds that grow into things too big for anyone to stop. That's the difference they never understood. Control is about holding on, but creation is about expansion. Control shrinks people down. Creation multiplies. Control exhausts itself trying to keep everything in place. Creation feeds itself and grows stronger with time. You tapped into a source of power that doesn't drain you, it fuels you. And now, while their hands are tired from trying to hold people down, your hands are full with the results of what you've built. The irony is that control always looks powerful in the beginning. It's loud, it's flashy. It makes people feel trapped, but it's also temporary because no one stays chained forever. People break free, situations change, fear wears off. But creation leaves a mark that can't be erased. The songs, the ideas, the movements, the legacies, those outlast every attempt to dominate. What you've created, they can't take away. What you've built, they can't control, and now they're forced to face it. All the energy they wasted on domination left them empty-handed, while the energy you invested in creating has made you untouchable. Their control has an expiration date. Your creation doesn't. That's why they're shaken now, because they see the truth. Control dies, but creation always outlasts it. Number 11, they're facing the ghost of who they could have been. They're facing the ghost of who they could have been. That's the silent punishment no one talks about. Every time they see you now, it isn't just you they're looking at. It's the version of themselves they forfeited. It's the opportunities they ignored, the growth they resisted, the transformation they could have stepped into if they had chosen respect instead of rejection. You're not just a reminder of your own rise, you're a mirror of their wasted potential. And that reflection haunts them. The truth is, people rarely regret the opportunities they never had. What destroys them is realizing they had the chance right in front of them and they mishandled it. You were that chance. Being connected to you, learning from you, building with you, that could have stretched them, matured them, elevated them. But they were blinded by arrogance, envy, or short-sightedness. They couldn't recognize that your presence was a gift, so they treated it like it was disposable. And now, the cost of that blindness follows them everywhere. What makes it worse is that your growth is undeniable. You've evolved into someone they can't avoid noticing, and each time it's not just admiration, it's torment. Because behind their eyes is the question they'll never escape. Who could I have become if I had handled that differently? That's the ghost they live with. It's not just you standing in front of them. It's the parallel version of themselves that will never exist because they failed the test. And here's where the haunting cuts deepest. Your rise didn't just prove you were always destined for more. It proved that they were too, but only if they had made better choices. That's what eats at them in the silence. Not only did they lose you, they lost themselves in the process. They can't rewind time, they can't rewrite how they treated you, and they can't rebuild what was destroyed by their own hands. So every success you walk in, every light you carry, every space you now dominate, it's a reminder of the ghost version of themselves that will never breathe. You don't have to say a word. Your existence is the haunting. And the truth they can't escape is that the ghost isn't you. It's them. It's who they could have been if only they hadn't thrown it all away. Number 12. Their apologies are pointless because they were never the gatekeepers. Their apologies are pointless because they were never the gatekeepers. For so long, they walked around like they held the keys to your destiny, as if your future depended on their approval, their support, or their opportunities. They believed that by shutting doors in your face, they were shutting down your progress. And maybe at the time, it looked like they were winning. Maybe it seemed like their rejection had power. But in reality, those doors were never the ones that mattered. They weren't the gatekeepers they thought they were. They were just standing in front of doors that led nowhere. That's the sting for them now. They look back and realize that every no they gave you, every time they tried to block your path, every attempt to withhold access, none of it stopped you. Because your path wasn't through their gates. You weren't meant to walk through the doors they controlled. You were meant to carve out a way they couldn't even see. You found roads they didn't know existed, opportunities they couldn't reach, and spaces where their authority meant absolutely nothing. And now, your success mocks their false sense of power. The truth is, apologies can't undo that. Because their offense wasn't just in how they treated you. It was in the arrogance of believing they had control over your life. They thought you needed them. They thought they had the final say. But life has a way of humbling people by showing them they were never as important as they imagined. You didn't rise because of them. You rose in spite of them. You didn't need their green light. You were the light. Now, any apology rings hollow because what they tried to block was never within their reach to begin with. You walked a path designed for you, one no human hand could close. Their rejection didn't stop you. It redirected you into places they couldn't follow. And the truth that eats at them is this: they never had the power they thought they did. They weren't the gatekeepers of your story. They were just bystanders watching doors slam while you built your own. That's why their sorry means nothing now. You've already proven that their gates were illusions, and your path was always bigger than their control. Number 13. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was strategy. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was strategy. To them, your quiet was a sign that you'd given up, that you had nothing left to say, nothing left to fight for. They mistook your absence from the noise as evidence that they had won. What they didn't understand was that silence isn't surrender, it's space, and you used that space to build. While they were busy talking, showing off, and convincing themselves of their own importance, you were rebuilding piece by piece in private, away from their eyes, away from their reach. Silence gave you the advantage of focus. It stripped away distractions and left you with time to sharpen your mind, strengthen your spirit, and put together a version of yourself they could never predict. Noise can only impress people temporarily, but silence is where transformation takes place. They thought you were buried, but in reality you were planted. And the version of you they remember, the one they mocked, the one they thought was finished, no longer exists. That's why your return is so unsettling to them. They were expecting the same person they left behind, the one they assumed would stay broken, small, or dependent. Instead, they're faced with someone unrecognizable, stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more dangerous to their illusions than ever. Your silence didn't erase you, it erased the weaker version of you they thought they could control. What came out of that silence is a person they can't bury again. And here's the part that cuts them the deepest. While they were celebrating your supposed defeat, you were preparing. Every day of quiet was an investment. Every moment they assumed you were down was a moment you were strategizing your rise. And now the payoff is visible. You didn't just return. You returned as someone who no longer plays by their rules. The truth is, silence was never about proving a point. It wasn't about trying to look strong by saying nothing. It was about creating distance, building quietly, and coming back so changed that they can't even recognize you. And now they're forced to face it. Your silence wasn't defeat, it was the strategy that made your comeback undeniable. Number 14, the brick that hits them. Is this: you never needed their belief to become real. The brick that hits them is this: you never needed their belief to become real. That's the hardest truth for them to face. Because their power over you was always rooted in the idea that their opinion mattered. They thought their validation was oxygen, that without their approval you couldn't breathe, couldn't grow, couldn't exist in your full form. They believed their belief was the stamp that made you legitimate. But your life has proven the opposite. You were real long before they noticed, and you became undeniable without a single ounce of their support. That's what tears at them now. They withheld recognition like it was currency, certain that keeping it from you would starve you of worth. But your existence was never tied to their applause. You didn't grow because they believed. You grew because you refused to quit. You didn't evolve because they saw you. You evolved because you saw yourself. Every step, every achievement, every transformation was fueled by something deeper than their shallow approval. And now that independence is a wound they'll never heal from because it proves they were never as important as they thought. It's humiliating for them because their entire ego was built on being gatekeepers of worth. They thought they could crown people and strip crowns away, as if they were the authority on who mattered. But your rise showed that crowns can't be given or taken by anyone. They're grown from within. And when your crown appeared, forged from resilience and persistence, it exposed their irrelevance. Now they're stuck with the knowledge that their disbelief didn't block you, it freed you. By refusing to validate you, they removed themselves from your story, and in doing so, erased their chance to claim any part of your becoming. And that's the sharpest cut. Not just that you succeeded, but that your success shines as proof that their belief was never necessary. That's why they can't recover from it. Because every time they see you now, they're reminded of their own uselessness in your journey. You never needed their yes, their applause, or their approval to become real. And the cruelest part? You became greater than they ever imagined without ever once depending on them. That truth will haunt them longer than any revenge ever could. The truth is, you were never just a person navigating life. You were the force that revealed who others really were. While they measured you with broken rulers, mocked your beginnings, and assumed your struggles were weakness, you quietly became unstoppable. Your consistency, your resilience, your evolution, all of it was a story they couldn't read until it became undeniable. You weren't competing in their game, you were creating a new one entirely. The silence they misread as defeat was the strategy that built the version of yourself they can't touch. Their absence became your advantage, their doubts became your fuel. Their rejection and disbelief never stopped you, they only carved the path to your greatness. Now they face the haunting reality of what they lost, not just in you, but in themselves. Every apology is meaningless because they were never the gatekeepers. You never needed their belief to become real. The growth they ignored, the opportunities they denied, the moments they underestimated, all of it was the foundation of your rise. And as they watch from the sidelines, they see the version of yourself that stands beyond their reach, beyond their influence, beyond the control they thought they held. This is the undeniable truth of the chosen ones. Your power doesn't need validation. Your evolution doesn't need witnesses. Your success doesn't need permission. And your presence is a reminder that those who doubted, mocked, or abandoned you were never the keys to your story. They were just the backdrop against which your greatness was forged. So let this be the final lesson for them, and the ultimate revelation for anyone watching. Your light was never theirs to give, your path was never theirs to block, and your rise was never theirs to stop. You were always the one, and now the world sees it, whether they ever admit it or not. If this resonated with you, make sure you don't just scroll past. Hit that subscribe button and join the community where we uncover the truths no one else dares to speak. Like this video if it hit you hard. Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. I want to hear your story. And don't keep this to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to see it, someone who needs to be reminded that they were always the one. Your support keeps this message alive, and together we'll continue to rise above what the world tries to dictate. Stay blessed always.